Okay, we're going to be looking at the Tudor poet Edmund Spenser. Now, Spenser was a contemporary of William Shakespeare. He was born round about 1552 and he died in 1599. The exact date of his birth is unknown due to the records being destroyed in the Great Fire of London. He was hugely influential in his time, and his legacy is of huge importance to literary history in Britain and in Western Europe. His most famous work was called The Faerie Queene. It's an epic poem and it is still one of the longest poems in the English language. He wrote it in honour of Queen Elizabeth. It's a purely analogous work and it can be read in many different ways. It can be read purely as a celebration of Elizabeth's reign, or it can be read as an analogy of the Protestant church at the time, and in other ways too. His career was helped by an introduction to the court by Sir Walter Raleigh, who introduced Spenser to the Queen, and she was highly impressed by his poetry and gave him a pension of £50 per year on which to live, which was a substantial sum of money in the 16th century. Spenser's work became really popular. His work was not only very deep, he was very pedantic in his way of writing. He'd set himself quite strict rules with regard to rhyme scheme and rhythm and how he would structure his poems. And so with writing something like The Faerie Queene, for example, he is to be able to keep those rules in place for a work which is as long as that is quite a challenge. But his work is also quite subtle. He has gentle humour in his work as well, so it became quite popular in his day. He's famous for creating what's called the Spenserian sonnet. So it's a form of sonnet which is different from the Shakespearean sonnet or the Petrarchan sonnet, and he wrote many sonnets. But the work that we're going to look on today is not one of his sonnets. It is called the Procession, of the Seasons. So let's read this now. Down the bottom we have a little vocabulary box to help us understand some of the terms that we are not familiar with just now that we no longer use, some of the words that we no longer use today. So this is the Procession of the Seasons. So forth issued the seasons of the year. First lusty spring, all dight in leaves of flowers, that freshly budded and new blooms did bear, in which 1,000 birds did build their bowers, that sweetly sung to call forth paramours. And in his hand a javelin did he bear, and on his head, as fit for warlike stores, a gilt engravened morion he did wear, that as some did love him, others did fear him. Then came jolly summer, all dight in thin silken cassock coloured green, that was unlined all to be more light, and on his head a garland well beseen he wore, from which, as he had chafed been, the sweat did drop, and in his hand he bore a bow and shaft, as he in forest green had hunted late the leopard or the boar, and now would bathe his limbs with labour heated sore. Then came autumn all in yellow clad, as though he joyed in the plenteous store, laden with fruits that made him laugh full glad, that he had banished hunger, which tofore had by the belly oft him pinched sore. Upon his head a wreath, that was enrolled with ears of corn of every sort he bore, and in his hand a sickle he did hold, to reap the ripened fruits with the which the earth had yoled. Lastly came winter, clothed in all in frieze, chattering his teeth for cold that did him chill, whilst on his hoary beard his breath did freeze, and the dull drops that from his purpled bill, as from a limbic, did adorn distill. In his right hand a tipped staff he held, with which his feeble steps he stayed still, for he was faint with cold and weak with eld, that scarce his lucid limbs he was able to wield. So the poem is, as you can see, we've got 4 stanzas, and each stanza deals with a season of the year. So we start from spring, summer, and autumn. And he's using the possession of the year, the passage of a year, and likening it to the cycle of a man's life. Each season is a personification of a different stage of life, from youth to old age. So we start obviously in spring, and it's and this person, this man that he's personifying, is young and full of strength. And then by the time we come to winter, we see an old man who's nearing the end of his life. So the poem deals with the themes of nature. It's a nature poem, but also with life and mortality. We see the passage of the man from his youthful vigour to his point where he's ready to die. He's an old, feeble man and no strength left in his limbs. We also see the theme of love. In spring, he's a young man looking for love. Okay, so now we're going to look at the rhyme scheme of this poem. So to identify the rhyme scheme, we would put a mark on the first line, A, and we're looking at how each line ends. So this ends in year. Flowers and year don't rhyme, so we're going to put a B here. Now, we need to be careful here. So this is year, but new blooms did bear. Year, bear. They've got a slightly different ending. This is it's almost like a broken rhyme here. They've got the air at the end, bear, so we'll put an A, although it's a broken rhyme. Then we've got flowers, bowers, those rhyme. Now we've got paramours, and so this is a new ending, so we put a C. Paramours, and then we've got bear again, so this is back to A, stores, moors, a C, and then where, fear. So in our first stanza, the rhyme scheme is A, B, C, A, C, A. So it ends on a rhyming couplet. Let's do the same with the next stanza. So we want to see if this rhyme scheme is continued throughout the full poem. So we do exactly the same process. So A, B, B. Now we've got a different one. C, B, C, and C. So this rhyme scheme is A, B, then we've got a B again, C, B, C, C. So it's slightly different between stanza 1 and stanza 2. And if you were to continue it for stanza 3 and 4, actually the rest of the poem is written in this rhyme scheme. And so we need to think about, why is there a difference in the rhyme scheme between the first and third and second, third, and fourth stanzas. And we also want to draw attention to our rhyming couplet at the end. So if we look at this last lines of each stanza, they're almost like a summing up of the stanza itself. And within that, to gain more understanding of what the form and structure of the poem is, we now need to consider the rhythm that is within the poem. So the rhythm of the poem is iambic pentameter. And this is famous from Shakespeare, and it basically is the rhythm of the human heartbeat. So we think of it as a de-dum, de-dum. So you've got this idea of de-dum. So an unstressed and stressed syllable. And that de-dum is called one iamb. It's it's like a metrical foot. So within each line, you have 5 of these. So if you think about, this is one syllable, this is a second syllable, we have 10 syllables in each line, and that's the rules for iambic pentameter. This is not true for the final line. If you even look at it here, it's longer. The final line is actually written in iambic hexameter. So we've now got iambic hexameter. So penta means 5, hexa means 6. So now instead of 5 dedums, we have 6 dedums, 6 of these metrical foots in the final line of each poem, which therefore leads to 12 syllables, because dedum, 2 syllables in each iamb. 6 times 2 gives us 12 syllables in the final lines of each of the stanzas. And so this is very deliberate. Not only is he's created the rhyme scheme to be consistent throughout the poem, he's done it intentionally. Now, if you are a great poet and you want to show off your poetic prowess, you would write a sonnet and you would write an iambic pentameter, and it's quite challenging. It's a difficult way to write. For when you hear iambic pentameter, it's a very natural way to read poetry. That's why it makes why Shakespeare used it. It's almost like it puts that beat of the heart. It flows very beautifully and helps actors to perform it. And when you hear poetry read iambic pentameter, it's very pleasing to the ear, but hard to write in. Iambic hexameter is even harder to write in. And so Spenser was quite pedantic. He wanted to write great poetry that would bolster the English literary repertoire. He wanted to have similar quality of writing as he was seeing in the continent. He wanted England to be a place that was famed for quality literature. So he would write he would choose to write in ways which would achieve that goal. So the hexameter is harder to write in, but let's also think about it in the context of the work he is doing. He's writing about the procession of the seasons, and perhaps ending the last line on iambic hexameter, he's underlining the fact there's 12 months in the year. Okay, so that is our form and our sequence here. Let's now look at the literary devices that he employs. Let's get rid of our annotations for our rhyme scheme. So we're going to look through each of the stanzas in turn and see what we can pull out. Obviously, we've already mentioned he is using personification. And we've got this idea of extended metaphor within that personification. We have alliteration, there's enjambment, there's foreshadowing, there's assonance. There is so many devices that Spenser has used, and we're going to look at them and comment on them as we go through stanza by stanza. So let's take the first stanza. So stanza 1, we have the season of youth. He likens this season to a time of strength and vigor and love. If you look at lines 2 to 4, let me just change the color so it will show up. 2 to 4, so these lines here. He has an image of spring where he's really focusing on the new growth. we have the flowers and the leaves budding and the birds building their nests. We have repeated alliteration, so they've got the b, the b, the b, and even built their bowers. So this continual use of the b sound is alliteration. And if you think about the way the sound that creates, a b, 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 it really emphasizes this whole idea of life bubbling forth, of the blooms budding and the building of the bowers, and it's quite a bouncy sound, so it helps us really capture this idea of spring bursting into life after the winter. We also see alliteration continued in the fifth line, where we've got the S and the S of sweetly sung, which enhances the sound of the birds and the season of spring. And he introduces this idea of this being the season of love, and so we've got the birds who are courting, building their nests, but also this young man who is ready for love. There's then a change in mood. So we have this idea of spring as young and vigorous, full of strength, and as a young lover. But now we have this idea of spring, this young man being like a warrior. And this leaves us uncertain as to what aspect of spring we are thinking about. This young man, is he a lover or is he a warrior and powerful? We see him with the javelin did he bear, and on his head, as fit for warlike stores, a gilt engraven morion he did wear. And so we've got this long sentence which shows us we've got enjambment here, but we've also got enjambment here. So enjambment is when a poet starts an idea, but he continues it into the other line. So, and on his head, as fit for warlike stores, a gilt engraven morion did he wear. So this idea of his headdress, so the morion is a helmet, if you look down in the vocabulary box. So he's wearing on his head this warlike engraven helmet, and so we have this enjambment in the description of his warlikeness. And we're left again with this idea of uncertainty in the final lines, as some did him love, others did him fear. So let's go on to the second season, and we've got a change of mood. No longer have we got this strong, vigorous youth who is either here to conquer or for love. We have now jolly summer. And Dight is dressed or clothed, and we have him dressed in a thin silken cassock coloured green. So in summer we have again we have alliteration with the cassock coloured green, but we also have assonance. So assonance is perhaps a literary technique that you might be more unfamiliar with. Assonance is the use of the consonant, the vowel sound. Sorry. And the vowel sound is repeated in words that are close together. So where alliteration, the sound is the first letter of, or the first sound in a word. Assonance, and similarly consonants, which deals with consonant sounds, these sounds are within the word. So we've got the I in thin and the I in silken. So this is enhancing this description, the thin silken cassock green of summer. This creates a really bright, clear image. So it kind of almost like sings. It's very lyrical. Spenser's writing is he writes in a very lyrical form. and it's very pastoral in its description. These sounds that he's using, the thin, the and the thin, and the and silken, create that bright, clean picture of summer green. And so we can we also see again, we see in Jamnant thin coloured green that was unlined all to be more light, and on his head a garland well be seen. So again we have these lines here from line the third down to the second down to the fourth line of the second stanza. It mirrors this idea from the first stanza describing what he is wearing. He wore from which, as he had chafed been, the sweat did drop. So between these lines is a change in mood. So when we see a change in mood, that's called a volta. When a poem changes the mood or the feel within a poem, that device is called a volta. And now, in the beginning, he's jolly summer, but now he is chafed, which means heated. The sweat did drop, and in his hand he bore bow and shafts, as in his forest green he had hunted late the leopard or the boar. So and then at the final line we come back to, so here we have this introduction to an idea that, is he jolly? We've got this slight change of mood, that he's really hot. He's also a hunter. And in the final line, and now would bathe his limbs with labour heated sore. So we ask ourselves a question. This does not sound very jolly. It sounds like he's been labouring hard, and the heat of the summer has sapped his strength, and he's really hot, and he's sweating, and this is not the picture of happiness that we maybe have expected in the opening line of this stanza. And we could think this is actually a foreshadowing. We're seeing, even in summer, there's a foreshadowing that all's not quite going well for the man of these seasons, that there's difficulty and there's toil and there's trouble and with him, that things are hard. It's not all just jolly and happiness, and that the toil of life is taking its toll on him. Also, let's just note here, in youth we have a javelin. In the adult phase of his life, where he's meant to be kind of prime of his life as an adult man, he's carrying the bow and shaft. So these are bows and arrows. So he's a hunter, and it's important just to note these, because in each stanza the man is holding something different. So the javelin is like this weapon, the bow and arrows he's using to hunt, but it's also a weapon as well. So it's just be mindful of how this is changing and adapting as he goes through his ages. Let's go to the next part of the poem. So we have autumn, and in autumn we have our autumn came all in yellow clad, and as he joyed in his plenteous store. So again, we've come back to this idea of joy. Autumn is a harvester. He's bringing in his plenteous store, laden with fruits that made him laugh full glad, that he banished hunger which tofore had by his belly oft him pinched sore. So we're now having this. In summer he was jolly summer, but he ended actually sore and sweaty and struggling under the toil of his labours. But now in autumn he actually can enjoy the work of the fruits of his labours. This is his middle-aged life, And he actually, in this point of life, he is full of joy, he's happy, his stores are full, his belly is full, and he's no longer struggling. Here again, we see the use of assonance. So this time with the O sound. So the oft, sore, to, for, this O, it's like that jolly O kind of sound that it makes. It sounds happy and jovial. The corn, sort, bore, repeating this O sound throughout the stanza. And this time he's holding a sickle. So a sickle is a tool which is, it's kind of a handle and it's got a blade like this, and it'd be used to harvest in the corn. But again, we now have again foreshadowing, where where there's a foreshadowing of death, because a sickle is also since medieval times been associated with death, and there would be images, and if you look at medieval images that are on churches of a personification of death, and you'd be carrying a sickle to represent the final harvest of men. So this foreshadows the winter that has to come. And now we come into the winter season, clothed all in frieze, chattering his teeth for cold that did him chill. So again, got the ch sound of the chattering teeth, so alliteration. And so he's really emphasizing this whole idea of cold. He really creates a strong image in the stanza of winter. Whilst on his hoary beard, his breath, so beard, breath did freeze, and the dull drops that from his purple bill, as from a limbic, did adorn and distill. So I've got the d sounds again here. So here we'd have we've got a mixture of assonance, alliteration and consonants, with this dill D sound being repeated, and it's this D sound sounds quite dead. It's got a d d d, almost like the thudding of time is running out and death is stalking at the door of winter coming, and the b sound really makes it feel cold, and the chattering teeth. So all these different techniques, the alliteration, the consonants, repeated different sounds, very intentional to create this powerful image of cold and death waiting at the door. The limbic, if we look down here, the limbic is an apparatus for distilling. So he creates this picture, and the dull drops that from his bill, from his purple bill, as from a limbic did distill. So we've got a simile here of the purple bill distill. So this is his nose, and it's a bit disgusting, but it's kind of just dripping, cold, and so we've got the simile using this idea of the limbic, this apparatus for distilling. In his right hand his tipped staff he held, with which his feeble steps stayed still. So again, we've got more alliteration. This S sound, this S kind of draws out, so it gives this idea of him walking slowly, his feeble steps, there's steps as well. This kind of slowing down in old age, as he was faint with cold and weak with eld. So eld is old age, that scarce his lucid limbs he was able to wield. And this time he's carrying a staff, which is obviously a picture of an old man walking stick. Let's just take a note of the thing. So he had his javelin in the first stanza. Then he had his bows and arrows. Then he had his sickle and his staff. So we've got this youth, this young man hunting, but he's kind of probably 20s, 30s. Then we have this middle-aged man with his sickle, the harvest time, and the staff, the old man. And so we have from youth to the inevitability of death. So this idea that life, we're all mortal, and regardless of how youthful and strong you are at the beginning, death awaits all of us. I also wonder if he's painting a picture of almost the progress of man. The image in the first stanza seems very classical to me. That's a picture that you could take from classical Greek literature, maybe one of the Greek heroes like Jason, or Achilles, and that, and then this idea of bows and arrows, this idea we kind of go from the Greek heroes into a more time of hunting, and but also kind of a movement more to an agricultural economy. And then the sickle is an economy that is built very much purely on agriculture, which is what England would have become. And but regardless of how man progresses, death waits us all. The other thing to to consider as well is he's using the seasons as a personification of man. So he's making comment on us as people, as men, and our progress from adolescence through to our eventual death. But he's also using man to describe the passage of the year. So you've got there's a two-way discord between a description of the natural world, but also a description of the condition of man. The other thing to consider as well is there's almost an allusion to Shakespeare's play As You Like It, and the famous speak by Jacques in that play where he talks about the 7 stages of man. It's a very similar idea of how we passage from youth to old age, and we've got these set stages in our life. And just to think about these things, think about how the Renaissance man, the Tudor mind, was thinking about such ideas and how they were shaping the society at that time. So I hope that's helpful. You may find other literary devices within the poem that there's other places where there's enjambment and other things. See what else you can find and pull out, and ask yourself, when you find a literary device, what is the purpose? What does it add to the poem? What does it make it feel? How does it change the tone or the meaning? Read poetry aloud to really get hold of how it sounds to your ears, to be able to understand the tone that a poet is creating. So I hope that helps.